The act, which established the Niger Delta Development Commission, NDDC, confers on it the onerous responsibilities of conceiving, planning, and implementing projects and programs for the sustainable development of the Niger Delta area in the fields of transportation, health, education, employment, industrialization, agriculture and fisheries, housing and urban development, as well as water supply. But the Commission has maintained that its constitutionally provided sources of funding have not been so forthcoming. This challenge of funding used to be identified as one of the teething problems of the NDDC, but not anymore in the estimation of a lot of Nigerians who believe that a lot of money, rather than a lack of it, has been the soft underbelly of that agency. Joining us now to further explore the challenges facing development in the Niger Delta is Dr. Jibrin Ibrahim, a former director of the Center for Democracy and Development. Dr. Ibrahim, good morning. Welcome to the program. Hello, Jibo. Good morning.
Morning.
Good morning. Good to have you on the morning show. Thank you for joining us. Well, quickly, I'd like to ask you, what is your take on the current developments with regard to the Niger Delta Development Agency? There are persons who hold the view that the NDDC, as it is otherwise called, was designed to fail, and that what is happening now should have been foreseeable. What do you think?
I don't think it was designed to fail. It was designed to bring development to the Niger Delta based on a long history of Nigeria being dependent on that zone for its revenues, and that zone itself being in abject poverty and underdevelopment. The idea was to direct resources to that zone to ensure they too benefit from the nation's oil wealth. But what we have seen over the last couple of weeks is that the NDDC has become a terrible exposure of the lack of governance in this country, that billions and billions of naira are simply pocketed by officials of the agency, by their political superiors, by legislators, and virtually nothing goes to the development of the zone. And what is frightening about what we are seeing is that this has been going on for decades. And what it tells you is the complete absence of monitoring in our governmental processes. And I think for me, it's really a challenge of the federal government. The federal government knows that over the years, trillions of naira have been channeled to that agency. At the same time, it's obvious to everybody that there are no programs or projects that are being completed by the same agency. It should therefore have been clear long ago that there is something wrong with the way in which the agency is managed, that it is simply not being run according to the law establishing it, and that basic due process mechanisms are not in effect in the agency. There should have been a stop to this very long time ago. And I think it's really an indictment of the anti-corruption stance of the present regime, that they've been seeing this for 5 years and nobody has said anything, obviously because its people appointed to run the agency are the beneficiaries, and they share these resources with their political masters. So nobody was complaining.
Well, given its role and the purpose of this commission and what we have seen in recent times, would you still say it's a necessary agency to have, or it's been a complete waste of time and resources of the people and the government of the region? is it still a relevant agency or commission to keep?
It's a very relevant agency to keep. The problem is not the agency. It is not the law establishing it. It is not the objectives that are defined for it. It is simply the fact that it is not allowed to do what is set out to do, and that corruption has completely taken over the agency. And that what we have been observing in recent times, that money is simply shared to people by the agency rather than carrying out the purposes for which it has been established. There's absolutely nothing wrong with the agency in terms of its conception, purpose, and functions, but there's everything wrong with the complete absence of due process mechanisms in the way in which it operates.
All right. Due process, these are the challenges amongst many other things, pretty much governance challenge in the way it operates. But these challenges have derailed the NDDC. A lot of money has been disbursed, but we can't account for it. Maybe after this investigation, we'll be able to account for it. And that affects the life of the people in the Niger Delta region because they want to see development. They want to go to schools. They want to drive on very good roads. They want potable water and the likes. The argument in some quarters has been, why do we even need a special purpose vehicle? Because we tried this song and dance before. We tried it with Umpadek. We saw how far it took us with Umpadek. Now it's the NDDC. Why don't we just put it, under the Ministry of Works, have a special budget for them there, and the Minister of Works can carry those functions out in the Niger Delta region than having a special purpose vehicle with its overhead and the likes?
I think the purpose of special purpose vehicles such as the NDDC is that it creates a situation where you can concentrate energy, concentrate resources, and engage in accelerated and intensive action. That's why you set up a special purpose vehicle. I completely agree with you that the history is very, very concerning from the days of Umpadek, which was dissolved precisely because of this type of behavior. But the point I'm making is that if the argument is every agency that has corruption should be dissolved, then you will have no governmental agency functioning in this country, because all of them have, to a certain extent, a culture of corruption. Now, the problem with the NNDC is not just the corruption, but that there is only corruption in its actions and modes of operation, and that therefore absolutely nothing is done. And I think when the head of that agency appeared at the National Assembly and was talking about, COVID came, so we shared out money, and there was no issue in his mind that you don't share money without it being in the budget, without it going through a due process mechanism, without it being allowed by the rules running that organization. So there isn't even a conscience among those who are running this agency that this money is not just for sharing, that it is for a specific purpose, which you have outlined in your introduction. It is for the development of the Niger Delta. It is for schools, it's for infrastructure, it's for economic development. And that's not what that money is being used for. And people take it simply as some sort of a largesse that can be shared with absolutely no thoughts on what its purpose is. And I think that's really the problem. I don't at all agree with the idea that if there is corruption in an agency, dissolve the agency. I would say if there's corruption in an agency, make sure that you investigate, you charge those who are corrupt to courts, you ensure they go to jail, and the next set will think twice about behaving in the same way. So the issue is, why have mechanisms of accountability never been brought into motion in terms of the affairs of the NDDC? And that's why I'm saying it's the responsibility of government that's not doing what it needs to do to ensure that that agency, that commission, operates as it should.
Well, but what we know is that the Buhari administration has ordered a forensic audit. And the presidency has said this is a clear indication of the government's commitment to its advertised war against corruption. But for us to move the conversation forward, what will be your recommendations for the repositioning of the NDDC, particularly with regard to governance issues? There are persons in the Niger Delta, for example, who have said that, look, not enough money has been given to the NDDC. That maybe perhaps if more money or the outstanding funds from the federal purse are made available, then perhaps things will improve. I don't know about that. There are some people who have also argued that the problem is the politicization of the NDDC, and that what we need to do is to make sure that going forward, politicians are kept away from the management of that agency. What are your thoughts?
My thoughts are that the obvious problem with the way the NDDC has been operating is the lack of monitoring and evaluation. Each year, a huge budget is allocated to the NDDC for development purposes. At the end of the year, there's absolutely no indication that any project has been done with the money. What this means is that there's a total lack of accountability, and the solution has to be to introduce forms of accountability. We run a democracy, and in a democracy, those who run the affairs of the nation are politicians. That's the constitution we have. That's the constitution we run. So the solution cannot be to remove politics from the agency, because that's what our constitution dictates. But politicians are not supposed to personalize public resources, to pocket public resources, and to refuse to implement projects in the budget that have been developed by the agencies they run. So the problem is absolutely clear. It's an accountability problem. It's a problem of lack of due process. It's a problem of organized criminal behavior by people who have been given responsibility of running an important agency in the public sector. Now, when you have criminal behavior, you prosecute the criminals and you ensure they are removed from office, simply on the basis of what the head of this agency said in the National Assembly, that they were sharing money because there's an issue in the country. That's enough to immediately suspend him from office. Why is he still in office? There have been so many scandals revealed about the Minister for Niger Delta Affairs. Why is he still a minister in the regime? These are the questions to ask, that if government is really concerned about the initial findings that have emerged on this issue, they should have started taking action. And civil service rules and regulations allows them to immediately remove from office officials who have been clearly indicted. the ministers serve at the pleasure of the president. If there are facts that have emerged that a minister has been irresponsible in his or her conduct, then it is the responsibility of the president whose mandate and whose election was based on his anti-corruption stance to take immediate measures to address this problem. That is where we have a problem, that action is not being taken, the life continues as usual, and that therefore people have the confidence to defend actions that are illegal, actions that are criminal, actions that are against the ethos of the public service.
Well said. But you've placed so much at the doorstep of the government. I want to go to the flip side, which is the people who should be the beneficiaries of this project and the establishment of this agency in the first place. Would you say that the people of the region have been docile or complacent? Or is it a case of complicity in all of this? Why have they not held the agencies and the government to accountability all these years? What do you think is responsible?
Well, I agree with you that communities, civil society, the people who are supposed to be beneficiaries need to play their role as citizens. Playing a role as a citizen means that you know that government operates for your welfare, and that when you see that your welfare is not being catered for, when you know an agency has been established and funded to promote your welfare, to promote development in your community, and that has not been happening over the years, you must speak up. You must challenge that agency. You must challenge the government that has responsibility of oversight over that agency. So definitely I would agree with you that there is a challenge that the people themselves are not having their eyes on the ball, that things are happening over their heads. They are not investigating, they are not questioning, they are not challenging, and they are not making an effort to ensure that their own interest is served through this organization carrying out its mandate on the basis of the resources made available to it.
I still want to interrogate the idea of SPV, Special Purpose Vehicle. Correct me if I'm wrong, so UNPADEC started in '93, and it spanned up to the late 90s before NDDC started. There was still this level of corruption. Somebody will have thought that when NDDC started, they will have put measures in place to make it more difficult for people to be this corrupt. But that's not the case. Don't you think we should work on the internal mechanisms that guides the NDDC in the first place?
When you look at the law of the NDDC, when you look at public procurement rules, they are absolutely clear on what is supposed to be done in operating that agency. Every money spent must have been appropriated in the budget. In spending out that money, there are very clear procurement rules that must be followed. You are not supposed to take public money and be dashing individuals, as they have been doing. So there is actually nothing wrong with the rules. What is wrong is that there is total disregard for those rules. That's why my first statement to say that it's a problem of implementation of due process mechanisms. You cannot invent better rules than what they have today. But if you have the best rules in the world and nobody follows it, those rules are useless. And that's what we are seeing, that we have the rules, that their intent is clear, their effectiveness, if implemented, would be beyond reproach. But you have a situation where there's just total disregard for rules, and those who are supposed to keep an eye on it, the National Assembly, for example, have the responsibility to make sure those monies are spent in accordance with the rules. What have they been doing? They simply say, share the money with us, and we'll look the other way. So that's not a problem of rules. That's not a problem of the organization. Well, it's a problem of lack of implementation of what's there. Yes.
Dr. Ibrahim, we have just about 2 minutes to go, but somebody sent in a text. I don't know if you can respond to it. It says, my take is that only mega projects for major transformation like superhighway to link the entire region and major factories must be handled by the NDDC. So long as small projects like 50 million, 100 million projects that even local governments can handle are still being awarded by NDDC. So long will the commission be a conduit of corruption. Do you think that can make a difference?
If you say they should only focus on major projects and they, in so doing, completely disregard the rules, it will be the same result. The point I'm making is not even the size of the project. It is the procedures you are supposed to follow in implementing those projects. And what I'm saying is, from UNPADEC through NDDC, rules and procedures are simply not being followed. And there's a mentality that people are sharing money in other places. It's our turn to share money in this place that has been allocated to us. That has been the problem, and that has to change.
Thank you very much indeed. On that note, that has to change. We want to thank you very much for joining us this morning.